This is a TalkStation original podcast.
On this week's episode of the Paper Boys podcast, Zack and I interview Maceo Donald, a former East Carolina football player. Maceo served as the sideline reporter for the Pirates this fall. He recaps one of the toughest seasons in ECU history. It all starts now on the Paper Boys podcast. Hello and welcome to the Paper Boys podcast. I'm JJ Smith.
And I'm Zack Nally.
We're reporters with the Carteret County News-Times. We're joined, as always, by our producer, Ross Caraway. Sorry we missed y'all last week. Zack was out with the Core Sound crud. Is that what we'll call it?
You have to give away my business like that? No, it was Thanksgiving Day. We took a break. All right? We felt great.
I didn't know. Did I break some kind of HIPAA rule or something there?
No, it was definitely a tough time. You know, it's Thanksgiving Day, and you're just trying to keep your head on straight. But I'm glad to be back.
Also, you should read Zack's column from last week to learn about what kind of wildness he had over the Thanksgiving break.
Oh, it never stops over my house.
And we are News-Times strong today. We are joined by our new reporter, Maceo Donald.
What's up, guys? I'm not that new anymore.
I was going to say, what's the date on it now?
Today's the 29th, so it's been August, September, October, November, almost, I guess, a full 4 months and about a week here.
Yeah, that's not new. You're a grizzled veteran now. In addition to News-Times reporter, Maceo pulled double duty this fall. He was a sideline reporter for the ECU Sports Network, game days Saturdays, and on Thursday nights he helped check out the radio show Sup Show.
Yep.
And unfortunately for Maceo, he was privy, not a front row seat, but a sideline seat to one of the worst football seasons in East Carolina history.
Yeah, I don't know the exact stats, but it was definitely a rough season to be a part of. But I will say before we dive into all the football stuff or whatever that I do feel like I learned a lot at the same time. I maybe learned more just because it was such a bad season. Usually when good things are happening, it's easier to report on those things. But during a bad season, it was tough. You know, those halftime interviews with Coach Houston was like, Coach, just tell me what you thought. It wasn't too much detail, not diving into it too much, but definitely learned a lot in how to work with different people and things like that. So overall, it was a solid, fall.
Well, for those who've never been a reporter, too, you don't understand how hard it is to be the one that the coach has to speak to when things are not going well. And you're like, I hate to bother you. I'm so sorry. Please just give me anything you want to say, because I know you're not happy about it right now and you don't want to, expound upon how it's been going. But sometimes you got to play that role.
No, definitely. And I learned just this year, too, just being, I guess, technically an employee of a company that's employed by the university. You're not trying to, talk bad about the team too much. It's more so just sticking to the facts and just covering them. So I think on both sides of that is just maybe sometimes I might have would have said more or wanted to say more, but I knew it probably wasn't the right place for me to say that. But at the same time, it's just, you got to work on your questions and asking coaches and not being too, I guess, scheme-oriented or detail-oriented in that. But it was good. And Coach Houston, he got into it a couple times, so it was all good.
Well, let's get into maybe some of the X's and O's of it, or the nitty-gritty. I mentioned that's one of the worst seasons in ECU football history. They go 2-9.
Yeah.
Give us your State of the Union. What went wrong?
I mean, to put it simple, it was just offensive struggles, really. And you guys saw we got our offensive coordinator, Donnie Kirkpatrick. They parted ways. Coach Houston announced that the week before the last game of the season against Tulsa. So you already knew that this was going to be his last game coaching, but it just comes down to offense. And I will give the players the benefit of the doubt. We lost, I think it was 73% of our offense last season. So an NFL caliber quarterback, Holton Ahlers, a starting running back for the Baltimore Ravens right now, Keaton Mitchell, got a 1,000-yard receiver with the 49ers, a tight end with the New York Giants. So all across the board, we lost a lot of skill players, and then our 5 offensive linemen, 2 of them graduated, who were fifth-year guys, a lot of experience. And then at the same time, you have 2 guys from Havelock, actually, that transferred out of ECU to Power 5 schools. So, I mean, you lost a lot of production and a lot of experience on our offense on the front line and in skill positions. But it was definitely tough to watch. I mean, especially being an offensive guy, you never want to see him struggle that bad, but some points of this season we were in close ball games and just couldn't get it done late down in the stretch. But I mean, it was brutal, and I'm happy that I'm a part of it, but I'm happy I wasn't a part of it as a player this year, to be honest.
Yeah, Maceo mentioned the offensive struggles. There are 130 teams. If when you go to the NCAA site and check out all the different stats, there's 130.
I think we're 129 maybe.
There's I counted about 12 different stats on offense, and they're in 120 or lower in just about every offensive stat there was. They were 125 in scoring. They were 127 in yards. Passing efficiency was 130.
Bad.
130 out of 130.
So we were last. Yeah.
Passing yards a game was 119. Rushing yards a game was 111. Third down percentage was 122. Completion percentage was 119. First down was 126. Number of times intercepted 112. Sacks given up 100. Times tackled for loss 106. Yeah. Just about as bad as you could possibly be.
Yeah, pretty bad. I kind of felt bad for the guys at some point because you got a lot of guys who are seniors and graduating, and it's their last time to play, and it just sometimes the timing is off a little bit, but it definitely happens. But on the flip side of that, we had a top, I think, 30 defense in total defense. I mean, they just announced it earlier today that we had 4 all-conference guys on defense and 1 honorable mention. So the defense was loaded, which kept you in ball games with, Charlotte, the Tulanes, that were under 1 score. But that offense, man, we just couldn't get it done when it mattered this year.
And that's the hard part. When you have a good defense, when you look at a program in total, that's nice. You can build on that in the future, or you can hang your hat on that. But offense is where the fun is, and if you're not having any fun, that's tough, both as a player and as somebody reporting on them. And if you just can't score touchdowns, then that certainly makes the watchability factor tough.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely right. Because, my first couple years, we were 3-9, which is only 1 game better than what they were this year. But we scored. We never had a problem scoring, so it didn't seem as bad, and it kept you in games a lot of the time. We were having games where we were scoring 50 points and still losing. But it's easier to score 50 points and lose rather than, not being able to do anything on the offensive end, especially for spectators who, spend their hard, earned money and hard work money to come to see a football game, and then it's not many highlights or action plays that you come to see. So, it was definitely a struggle this year, but, you can only go up from here at the same time.
Yeah, you wonder if the offense would have just been, when average this year, what the season would have looked like. Yeah. You look at some of the defensive numbers, like Maceo said, the yardage, they were 37th in the country. Points, they were 43rd. Amount of first downs they gave up was 28. Tackles for losses, they were 16th in the country. Yeah. So really outstanding defensive season.
Yeah, great defensive line. We had our D tackle, second team all conference, Julius Woods safety, first team all conference. You had a corner there who was second team all conference, Trevon Revel, and then an honorable mention, Chad Stevens, who was on the D line also. But those guys, especially that D line they have there, I think these guys, it's their 3rd or 4th season this year. So they've been together since, I guess, 2020 might have been their first year, and so they all kind of came up together. So they're loaded, and they have really great coaches. Coach Harrell's the defensive coordinator for ECU, so he does a great job. They're definitely capable, and like you said, a lot of those games they might have could have won if they got a little bit. And it was kind of a little bit of a joke with us. It was just saying that we only would have to score 17 points to win a lot of the games we had, which isn't anything, but our defense was just that great.
When you look back at the games you covered this year, obviously a lot of them were tough to watch. What's the 1 or 2 that you remember that you really enjoyed watching?
That I enjoy watching?
That may be a tougher question to ask.
That I enjoyed watching? Well, I'll say this. It's always fun watching, especially just being just recently removed from the team. It's always fun watching your teammates and some guys that you really, for the last several years just kind of were around every day, working out, training, whatever it is, hanging out. But I guess maybe 2 of the best games to watch this year.
Even just 1.
Well, I'll say,
didn't they?
Well, they won 2. We won against Gardner Webb, which is an FCS opponent, and we beat. Who was the other team we beat? FAU. But I'll say I won't even count those 2 games. But just as far as experiences, week 1 against Michigan in the Big House, so that was one of the craziest places I've ever been. So I definitely say that, and then also just UTSA. They play in the Alamo Dome there in San Antonio. So that was another. I never played in a dome or been in a dome before, so that was also another great experience. But games, I don't know. It's hard to say. There's moments. There's definitely moments, but a whole game, I don't know.
It's funny you mentioned the Ann Arbor game. If you go back in time and fit the week following that, and ask ECU fans what the season was going to be. Probably a lot of optimism the way they played versus Michigan, which now is one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, you're still trying to figure it out, and you knew what they were regardless. You knew Michigan was Michigan regardless. But for us, I mean, it wasn't – I think we gave up maybe 27 points against them. I think we only ended up scoring a field goal. So, I mean, it wasn't a terrible game, and it was still a lot of optimism early in the season. Sadly, just as the season went along, we weren't able to fulfill that optimism that everyone had. But I mean, those two games, I mean, were crazy, and some of the best, experiences and some of the best photos I have also too up there were pretty nice. So.
Hi, folks. Bob Lowry here, and this episode of the Paper Boys podcast is brought to you by the Carteret County Speedway.
I'm Ryan Kelly.
I'm Lynn Schultz.
And we're the hosts of the Senior Moment podcast.
Each week we bring you conversations with experts right here in our community about the common and uncommon challenges facing our aging population and caregivers.
We discuss the challenges of caring for a loved one with dementia, as well as the importance of health planning, family history, and much more.
Join us every week for Senior Moment, streaming now on Spotify, YouTube, and at CarolinaCoastOnline.com.
This is West Carteret coach Will Kennan, and this is the Paper Boys podcast.
All right, you've heard Maceo say a number of times here, like we should give some background on Maceo. He was a standout at East Carteret High School. Thought he was going to go to Elon. We won't get into all that. That didn't happen the way it was supposed to. But we don't root for Elon in Carteret County anymore. Ended up at ECU, a walk-on, then got a scholarship, and Maceo was part of a big turnaround in Greenville. They hadn't produced a winning season for 6 straight years. Then in Maceo's last 2 years, they went 15-10, including 8-5 his last year, and their first bowl win since 2013. Mm. That's another thing that kind of makes this year so tough. Is it seemed like the trajectory was headed up, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we all had a big expectation just where the program was going as a whole. Maybe being inside of the locker room more and just kind of seeing how everything was and kind of the guys that were leaving and the guys that would still be there. You might not have thought it was going to be another 8-5 season or better or 7-5, but you definitely thought they were going to be able to be bowl eligible, which is 6 wins. This was probably the worst way the season could have gone, and I think everyone pretty much knows that. It's just, probably I don't know the tech guys, if they have algorithms and things like that to see where they're going to end up. It was probably the last and worst option, and things just didn't fall our way this year, which is pretty sad. And like we said earlier, it was hard for me to watch at some points. What
was the discussion, number one, with former players, guys you played with last year, and what was the discussion you got just from the general East Carolina fandom about how the year was going? Yeah,
as far as players, I mean, and I think that's a part of the whole program changing is that guys didn't quit on each other and kind of start pointing fingers when the defense was performing very well and the offense wasn't, and they were lacking a little bit. So I think, as far as players, they were all still supportive and all still wanting to win. And I think a combination of just between how the program has changed as far as, morale and kind of how the players act and are respectable around the community, and also seeing former ECU players get shots at the next level, I think that's kind of contributed to guys, still pushing forward, even towards the end of the season when they're 2-10 or 2 and whatever. So I think that's kind of where you see the program going. And it's sad because this year it's kind of overshadowed just because of the record we have. And this is the first time we've had 4 all-conference guys on one side of the ball since, I think, 2013. So it's been 10 years since you've had 4 all-conference guys at ECU to get those awards on the same side of the ball. So, that defense was amazing, and it just sucks the offense was lacking a little bit, and you couldn't really see that.
I mentioned 2-9 already. Yeah, Maceo's right. They're 2-10. I'm sure you're in some text chains with some guys you were on the team with last year. Well, I bet they were asking you a lot of questions this year, weren't they?
Yeah, a lot of the guys I came with that are doing, their thing like me now, and they're just, Mace, what's going on here? Or are they going to play this guy or whatever? But, even with us, we want them to do good and we wanted them to have a successful year. But at the same time, it was almost like a little bit of like, we were the reason. It's kind of just, from class to class, you kind of argue who has the best class and who has the most production between each class. And it was kind of like, like our class was the best class we've had here. So it's kind of a little bit of bragging rights. But at the same time, you want to see them succeed, though.
Everything in football boils down to the quarterback. If you've got that position right, it takes care of a lot of everything else. And Holt Naylor's over the past 4 or 5 years, made everything look really good in the ECU, and this year the struggle was to find his replacement.
Yeah, definitely. We had two guys who played for us this year, Alex Flynn and Mason Garcia. And Mason had been in the program. This was his 4th year, and Flynn, this was his 5th year. So both of those guys had been in the program for a while, and it was finally kind of this year. I think everyone thought Mason was going to be the guy. He was the most kind of complete, just naturally gifted and talented player we had, 6'5", about 250, and does have an NFL caliber arm and arm strength. But for him, it just didn't kind of come together, I guess, how everyone thought it was going to be. And, the coaching staff, I feel like, was kind of banking on him being the next guy. And, Holton was a guy who started for pretty much 5 years. So I think they thought he was going to be the next one. And so that didn't work out. And Alex kind of gets his chance mid to early in the season. And, those guys, they just struggled at some points, but it wasn't all them. It's still an offensive line that's got to block for you. It's still receivers that got to catch the ball when you do get it to them. So there's a lot of factors into winning games and just having a successful offense or defense. But those guys had their opportunities, and I'm sure they'd want to get some plays back this year. And I'm sure the coaching staff would probably want to get in some better sets and kind of, be able to plan the season and the offense around what they're good at. Because sometimes you just got to – sometimes you just got to scratch everything you might have planned, and sometimes you just got to go with what the guys are doing good. So I think that's kind of, to make it simple, I think that's kind of what happened this year in the QB room.
Garcia, the highest-rated recruit in program history, a 4-star. So obviously they thought he was going to be the answer.
Yeah, they did. And, I mean, like I said, he does have NFL-type talent. And I wouldn't just say that easily because you just realize how hard it is to get to the NFL. But talent-wise, before you put him in a scheme or put him in a system or get him out there on game days when you can actually get hit, he's probably one of the most talented QBs I've seen in person, just as far as arm strength and his capabilities with his arm and his legs. But yeah, he just entered the portal yesterday. He just announced that, so best of luck to him. I hope he ends up somewhere good for him. But I think someone, if they get him and develop him a little bit, I know he's an older guy, I think he can be really big for someone's offense.
Yeah, we enter that part of the year now, right? You got some every time you click on like Hoist the Colors, ECU football site or any other one, it's who's entering the portal, and you're going to be looking at who's leaving and who's coming in.
Yeah. I mean, that's it's kind of a hectic time for coaches and also players. Just some guys you might just realize you might want to take a chance at another school or might get more time. For some guys, it's they might have whatever issues they have with coaches or anyone on the staff, and other guys it's maybe trying to upgrade with what you've seen now the last few years with like NIL and the transfer portal. And even last year, some of our team from last year on the defensive end, we experienced that, I think, for probably the first time in ECU history where people are transferring to kind of upgrade. Usually ECU's been a kind of that mid-major school where guys will come down to ECU, really good guys will come down to ECU and play. But last year we had a few guys transfer up, had a couple guys maybe 3 guys go to the Big 12, transfer to SEC, transfer to the Pac-12 or Pac-2 now. I guess we don't know what's going on with them. But you kind of experience that, but it's all a different ball game now, and you got to give that NIL money to get some really good players.
And you guys talked about the trajectory of the program and how, even as a coach, as coaching personnel, even if you want to create a winning culture or try to create a culture in which, success is expected or whatnot, the turnover that you face in this current climate of college athletics is so high that it really is dependent on the personnel that comes and goes. I mean, you could have a system in place, but if everybody on your offense graduates or leaves through the transfer portal, you have to teach that system to a whole new group of people, and that can be a challenge, I'm sure.
Yeah, it definitely is a challenge, and I think you're seeing the difference now where, you're not getting it used to be where you would get a freshman and you would have a really big freshman class and you get a couple years to develop those guys, and some of those would turn out to be some starters and really big players for you. But now with NIL and everything, and like you said, it's a lot of turnover. You're getting guys who can play for you right now. So if I'm a coach, if I'm an OC or whoever, I might think a guy has a lot of potential, that's a senior in high school, might have a lot of potential. But if I already have seen this other guy who's proven that he can go play and be productive at a different school and he's in the transfer portal, it just makes sense for you to go pick that guy up. On the other hand, with that happening is less I guess I would say rapport maybe in the locker room is not that tight knit. Most athletic teams preach that family, type of thing. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But I don't think, your recruiting tools and why people want to come to your school is for that in 2023, 2024. So now it's that NIL and trying to get in a spot where I can play at the next level for most guys. So you don't have that much, camaraderie. And usually I would say there's more camaraderie at the level ECU's at. Maybe not so much at a Georgia or Alabama or Oregon, whoever. But it does take away a little bit of that, though.
Is that still a major role player in college athletics, the camaraderie, the chemistry you talk about?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the same thing with the NFL. I mean, these guys are all college football players. They're all capable. I mean, it's a very big difference between high school and college. So I mean, everyone can play. Even the bench players, they can do a little bit of something. Everyone can play. So I mean, it does have a lot to do with that camaraderie. But at the end of the day, you have a job to do. But I feel like you see that more, I would say, at the pro level also, because I mean, you like the Panthers. I know you like the Panthers, Zack, and they're one and they're worse than ECU.
Don't put that on me.
They're worse than ECU this year, but I mean, they still have NFL caliber guys. They have the #1 draft pick on their team, so a lot of that your success does have to do. I mean, he was a stud, Heisman winner.
Absolutely, he was great at Alabama.
Yeah,
he sure was.
So I mean, but I don't think it's necessarily his fault they're not as successful this year, but that camaraderie and all that piece. Well, it still applies, even though they have a job to do.
The question I have is the incentive for these players that come in. The incentive has changed, sort of, on a macro level, where I'm not necessarily we're not trying to play for each other. I'm not saying totally trying to play for myself, but the incentives are a little more financial, a little more individual, and that is changing. Is that a change for the better, for the worse? Is it just a change that college football will adjust to?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a change, and I think I think it's kind of each his own. They can decide if it's good for them or not good for them. If you count at ECU, you might say it might not be that great for you just because you're not in a market and an area that can probably compete, at least NIL wise, with maybe the NC State tour in Raleigh, that area with Duke and Raleigh, NC State, whatever. But I will say it's kind of something you have to just adjust to. And I remember being in a meeting with John Gilbert, the athletic director at ECU, and he was talking with board members of Pirate Club, which is where donors give their money to the program. And it's like, you might not understand it, you might not like it, but this is a quote from him. It's a sandbox that we're gonna have to play in, and that's basketball, that's football, that's baseball, even some of the other sports. But specifically those major money grabbing sports like basketball and football is where you see that.
Hi, folks. Bob Lowry here, and this episode of the Paper Boys Podcast is brought to you by the Carteret County Speedway.
I'm Pastor Carl Zarowski.
I'm Pastor Brian Lassiter.
And I'm Pastor Bill Clear. Right now, more than ever, faith matters.
Every Sunday here on the radio, a few local pastors discuss faith in the news and how it relates to you.
We explore local, state, and national issues through the lens of faith.
We look at the role of Christians in our world and ask, should the faithful be doing more?
Join us Sunday mornings at 8 for Faith Matters, only on the Talk Station.
I'm West Carteret coach Lindsay Howell, and you're listening to the Paper Boys Podcast.
All right, we've talked about the bad and the ugly. Maybe we can talk about. Well, we'll touch on a little bit more of the bad and the ugly. When you go 2-10, somebody's going to lose their job, right? And offensive coordinator Donnie Kirkpatrick lost his job. What do you think going forward with the kind of style of offense that Coach Mike Houston is looking to bring in?
Yeah, I think. Well, Coach Houston, I think what he wants to do, and I think what he's traditionally done is kind of a run-first offense where you run, you're hard-nosed, and you play behind a really, really good defense. And sadly, I think that ECU isn't the best place for you to try to do that, at least in my opinion, just because, the type of recruits you're going to get in because everything starts up front. So you're not going to get a Michigan O-line, or at least not multiple of those guys that will really make a difference at a school like ECU. So I think if you look back at the school's kind of like success on offense where you get back-to-back, receptions leaders in the whole NCAA back-to-back years, I think you have to kind of air it out. So that's what I kind of think they will kind of try to go to. You kind of just have to play to your strengths and to your speed instead of just, size and everything. And if anybody listening to last year, because we did have a really good year last year, we had 2,000-yard receivers and a 1,000-yard rusher. But I think that having a very special running back kind of clouded up the picture of kind of the offense and kind of what we've done in the past. So, I mean, we had a guy, Keaton Mitchell. I mean, the dude's starting for the Ravens now, so I think he just made a big difference on the style of offense we were running in the last few seasons. So I definitely see them going to somebody that will score a lot of points, and somebody who can kind of do it in an explosive fashion, not just kind of, a traditional run-first kind of offense.
Plus, that was be weird to be a run control offense at ECU where you're known for like quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Whether there's Holt Naylors or Shane Carden or going back in the day to David Gerard and Jeff Blake. I mean, it's always been aired out at ECU, it feels like.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I just talked to Justin Hardy on Saturday. He was at the game and we had him on our pregame show. He was just saying when he was there, it was airing the ball out. It was pretty much just a track meet. Guys would just run, pass, high tempo offense and just try to tire out the defense. But I will say, as far as Coach K, I mean, the guy's been in the business forever. Tons of experience. He's loved around ECU. Maybe not so much this year, but he is loved around ECU. And I mean, even when Justin Hardy and Zay Jones was at ECU, he was their receivers coach under Lincoln Riley as the OC. Who's the head coach at USC, obviously now Southern Cal. So I mean, he knows a lot. Definitely has a lot of experience. This year, it just didn't go the Pirates' way. So
yeah, Kirkpatrick, he's kind of been got some ECU blood. I mean, he's been around so long. I'm sure he'll bounce back with a resume like he's got.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's gonna go home now and hang his cleats up. I think he's around 65, mid to upper 60. So, I mean, he's been around it, I'm sure, since he's graduated college when he was 21, 22 years old. So, I think he mentioned something about his wife wanting to retire in the mountains or something. So, he said he's been leading the family so far. So, I think it's time for her to lead. So, Coach, I do wish him the best.
Coach Houston is your coach at ECU. Felt like he, again, turned around the program. Y'all had a couple good years. They've fallen off this past year. What do you think the future holds for him? The AD spoke, Gilbert, and has confidence, but again, another year like this year, and who knows what that end of year talk looks like from the AD.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to kind of just keep confidence in Coach Houston right now, just because his track record shows you that he can be successful, and he has been successful even at ECU. This year was just completely upside down year, but the worst way it could have went. But just how the business goes in college football, especially at the FBS, Division I level, it's you produce or you're going to go home or go somewhere else. So I think it's definitely kind of a 1-year deal thing for Coach Houston. So hopefully he can at least bring the guys back to a bowl game. But if they don't get to a bowl game, then you might see some changes there, which is a whole different conversation and a whole different topic. And it would be a big change for everybody, top to bottom, because when you get rid of a head coach, that's you're losing about 20 or so jobs right there. People are losing their jobs. So it's definitely a big decision when you do something like that.
You kind of answered the next question I was going to ask is what does success look like next year? What do you think the baseline he has to hit?
Yeah, I mean, at least 6 wins for bowl eligibility. And before, just 5 years ago we were 3 and whatever, but you just kind of raised that bar to where you expect to go to a bowl game every year, and that's kind of even some of the guys on the team who were a part of those 2 years, that's what their expectations are also. So I mean, I think at least 6 wins, and I think you have the defensive coordinator and the defense that will kind of be that backbone and will kind of keep you in a lot of games that you might not would be if your defense wasn't as good. So I think they'll definitely rely on that and just working in whoever they get as transfers and freshmen and whoever the OC will be.
And Coach Houston's his resume, obviously the guy knows what he's doing. Just because you have a bad year doesn't mean you can't win a national championship at James Madison.
Yeah,
you played under them. I'm sure you have confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I think it's definitely possible. But I feel like Coach Houston, at the same time, he's one of those guys where he's been around it so long, kind of an older school guy, tough guy, where he might want to stick to what has gotten him there. And sometimes you might need to make a change. And I think you're probably around where you need to make a change at ECU. And I think, his decision to part ways with Coach K is the first step to that. So I think he'll do whatever he needs to do to get another winning season. And on top of that, it's not just a winning season, but that's how he, feeds his family and does his thing. So I think he definitely knows what's on the line coming into this offseason.
A lot of pressure on next year.
Yeah, definitely a lot of pressure. And, a lot of pressure isn't that great, but it can be good at times if you know how to handle it. But it's definitely a lot of pressure on some of those guys.
We've talked about what a tough fall it was for Maceo.
Yeah, you come in as your first year, and you the two favorite football teams that you have a close connection with, East Carteret and East Carolina, both have really tough years. East Carteret goes 1-9,
2-8,
2-8. Oh, that's right.
So
the last game against
2-8 and 2-10 was.
That's right.
And combined 4-18.
And I'm so curious because losing, as sports reporters, we do have to face it. But as a fan, as someone that's not having to report on it, when your team starts to lose, you kind of disengage with the team that year. You might notice a headline, you might watch the game, but you're not as engaged, you're not as enthralled in what's happening because they're losing. As a reporter, you have to sit there and you have to watch it. And I'm going to go ahead and reveal a little thing here. I'll never forget the first game you covered against East Carteret. You texted JJ and said, "Do I need to stay here to the end of this game? Like, this is terrible."
The result had been settled well before the final whistle.
Yeah, this is not fun to be here. And so as a sports reporter, you do have to sit there and kind of take it. And we don't talk a lot about losing as sports reporters, but it's a big part of sports. Someone wins, someone loses. Sometimes you lose a lot. And I'm curious, now that you've stepped into this reporter role full time for an entire season, is there a difference between what that feels like at a level like ECU and what that feels like at East Carteret, where there's lots of different factors that go into it, but you're watching the sideline, you're watching the players, you're watching the attitudes. Is there a distinction between the two?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a distinction, and I think it's a distinction, just based off the level it is. College is a lot more serious, a lot of behind-the-scenes things going on, and, a lot of jobs and money riding on your success. High school is more about fun and just, I just remember being back in high school and it was just about being with my teammates, classmates I've grown up with, trying to win some football games and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's definitely hard regardless, especially when you're a competitor. You never want to lose. But as far as, high school, it's you can have your years. I think there's always ups and downs, seasons for high school sports. You might have a couple years where you have a lot of talent. The next couple of years where it might not be as great, but I think that's a lot of the fun in it also, because you guys are always trying to win, but it doesn't really matter who's next to you. You might know your guy's not the best, but you're still going to go out there and fight for your guy just because you kind of grown up with him and everything. So I think it's just a big difference across the two, just in general.
Was it hard to come in and watch that level of results or play for those two teams?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely hard at times, and at least being at ECU, I just got off the team, how you guys mentioned, so it's kind of like, you're almost like 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of, so it's like, they could be doing this, or, what the coaches sometimes might be calling or whatever, so it's harder to watch that just because you were just in it, but also going back to East Carteret and watching them, that's also hard to watch. But it's regardless, it's your alma mater, so you're going to want them to see good, especially with Coach Frazier. Me and him are pretty close, and he helped me a lot, my senior year and just transitioning to college as well, because he's a former, collegiate student athlete also. So it's just, it's never easy to watch some teams lose, and I know it's been hard for him also.
Well, was it like this year being a print reporter, but also being a multimedia reporter?
Yeah. I mean, it was good this whole fall. I mean, it was definitely different being, the three things that I kind of did, writing here, reporting here. That's print. So obviously I'm writing that a little bit different. The sub show, I'm on camera, doing some things like that. So you kind of got to break those nerves, and it's kind of in a public setting at a restaurant. So people are still there, like eating, dining, whatever. And also the sideline reporting thing, that might've been the just straight up easiest out of the three, just because you're not on camera. And then you can kind of verbally you can speak to what you're kind of talking about or seeing on the field, instead of kind of writing it and kind of having to submit to formatting and stuff like that, which isn't a big deal, but it definitely makes it a little bit easier just speaking and not having to type or be in front of a camera.
How easier was it for you to be a sideline reporter for East Carolina as opposed to, let's say, you did it at App State this year?
Oh, way easier, just because I know all the guys, most of them, and kind of what they do, what they like to do, their stats, and even just like you said earlier, being in some of those group chats, you kind of know what the vibes are for each week and kind of how the guys are prepping or whatever. But it was definitely fun, and I think the guys liked having me around also too, and it was good just, having that first kind of season away from, ball where you committed so much time to. So I think it was kind of a good transition for me also.
How many games were there where you got the itch, where you wanted to run out there? Every one? Or did that finally fade away?
Not everyone. A couple of them, like Michigan, it was like, yeah, like that would be a crazy game to be a part of.
Especially early in.
Oh, yeah, like that would have been an exciting game to be a part of. I don't know about anything else where it's just like really, really itching. Yeah. Of course, a lot of the games I'm like, man, like should have done this, or it would have been fun to do this. But no, definitely Michigan was one of those ones I was like, man, it would have been dope to play here.
What's it like seeing somebody play on Sundays in the NFL that you played alongside?
I mean, it's a good feeling just seeing them out there, and you know how hard people work for that. You're like I think it's like the 1% of the 1%. So I mean, it's insane, and you really kind of realize how special those guys are. But also it kind of just shows you, at least as a younger player, seeing a few older players get a shot, it's just you realize how close you are to that next level. Because for me, it was like I didn't even know I could play in college until I guess I was probably like a sophomore in high school. My parents weren't like big time athletes or didn't play college or maybe even really high school sports like that. My dad probably did a little bit, but it wasn't like sports were like a huge thing, as far as what we do as a family. Even though all my siblings, we were athletes, but you just kind of see how close you are. Because for me, I didn't know I could even play in college. And you get to college, and it's just like the next step is professional. So you really don't see, how close you are. I mean, two of my roommates, they got chances in the NFL. One of them was a guy smaller, like around my size. So even for guys like that, you see it's still opportunities for you out there. And then Keaton Mitchell, I mean, Keaton Mitchell and Jaquan McMillan both starting right now. Jaquan McMillan played corner for us. He's a nickel for the Denver Broncos. I think he's had a turnover in like 3 straight games. Keaton Mitchell, I mean, he's balling for the Ravens now. I think they're 8-3, one of the best teams in the AFC. So, I mean, you just see how close you are to that next level, and it's kind of insane, honestly.
I saw you taking up for you guy Mitchell on social media the other day.
Yeah, got to take up for him, man. And they need to increase his speed on Madden too. I played with him, and his speed's like a 93, and I saw him run by. I forgot the DB from Seattle who ran like a 4.2 at the combine. I'm like, his speed needs at least to be like a 95. I mean, the guy can fly, and I think that's why they're using him so much, because if you let him get to that second level, you might as well call it quits.
And it shows you just how close somebody can be to making it or not making it. You were kind of talking about how you didn't understand how White hasn't gotten more attention throughout his high school to college to pro.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, a lot of the times, like, guys are stuck in their way and they're used to seeing what, they want to see or just what they've seen in the past. But, sometimes you just got to take away all the measurements and where you went to school and all that stuff. Because, I mean, if you can play, you can play. And, I mean, even today, Jackie Brown was play for East Carteret and got to play. He's playing a little bit professional now. I'm just like, he's probably one of the best basketball players I've seen, ever. And like, he didn't get chances that I probably thought he should have just because of, maybe his height or whatever the case may be. But I think, sometimes you just got to forget all of that stuff. And if they can play, if they're productive, at least give them a shot.
And Mitchell was big time running back in Georgia?
Yeah, he was in high school. He's second in front of Herschel Walker for the most touchdowns.
Yeah.
Herschel Walker for the most touchdowns in a season in the state of Georgia. So he's second all time in that, and he surpassed Herschel Walker. Came to ECU, kind of a little bit underrated recruit.
Yeah.
Went to a big time high school. A lot of guys who played in SEC. Got to ECU. Got a little bit of time during his freshman year, during COVID year. He had another guy in his class, Roger Harris, who was still at ECU, who kind of started before him that season. Had a really great season also. He's a great player. And then the next season, he just kind of explodes and then has 2 really great seasons. So, I mean, he just kind of, it's just timing. You kind of get it
and
right.
And then doesn't get drafted, right?
No, yeah, doesn't get drafted.
So just totally overlooked at every level.
Yeah, at every level. And, I mean, people are asking yourself, like, how did this guy not get drafted? And, I understand a lot of the times if you're a owner or GM, you might think you could get him as an undrafted free agent just because of his size or whatever. And there's a lot of games and politics behind it also. But, I mean, they're definitely getting a starting running back for a undrafted free agent price. So, I mean, I get it. So
those are two guys Maceo played with. I'm sure there's a lot of guys you played against your time at ECU that went on to play in the pros. Yeah. There's also another guy Maceo played against as a pro athlete, Bam Adebayo.
Yeah.
Maceo was on the floor with those East Carteret state championship days going against Northside Pinetown. What's it like seeing him just being an all-star?
Yeah, it's crazy. And my parents, we all still root for him and stuff, even though he never beat us. But he's been able, I think he's played in 2 finals already in his young career. So, I mean, he's had a lot of success, and he's getting a good paycheck too on him. So it's pretty good having some players from Eastern North Carolina do their thing in the pros. But yeah, I mean, that was him. I played against him in basketball and Brandon Ingram in high school. My true freshman year. So I mean, it was pretty great playing against those guys. I think I have some pictures of me standing beside Bam at the free throw line and Brandon Ingram. They're like a whole Maceo taller than me.
A whole other Maceo unit of measurement.
Yeah, it's just wild. There's a video out there on YouTube of Bam kind of dunking on me. I won't say he dunked on me because I kind of stepped out of the way, but it's great. It's great seeing.
Hey, you should wish he did. You can say that the rest of your life.
No, yeah,
I've
still been saying that now. It's an accomplishment in my head.
For sure.
It's dope seeing them, though.
And also, I think y'all was like 6-0 versus him, I think, those 2 years that he was at Northside Pinetown.
Yeah, never lost.
Yeah, because it was like 2 times during the regular season. Then I think one time was a tournament game maybe, and then one time in the playoffs.
Yeah, playoffs before we went to the States. And that was just a great feeling because we saw them beat – I forgot who they – Jay Huff. You guys remember where Jay Huff? He played at Virginia. Voyager Academy.
Yeah, he went to Virginia.
Yeah, and they played them – the regional finals of that, I guess it was my freshman year, 2014-2015 season. The regional finals for the East was like us, Northside, Voyager Academy, and a different school who we played. And we were watching Northside play Voyager right before we were playing in the regional finals or semifinals. And we saw them going to overtime, Bam and them win. And we were like, oh, yeah, we just got to win this game. We know we're about to go to the States because we already beat them however many times, Bam Bam's team. But it is great seeing those guys play pro and get their shot and kind of shine.
And Huff's in the NBA now too.
I think he is, or maybe he's.
I think I've seen him a couple times
overseas or something. But he's still definitely playing. I mean, he's 7 foot. He better still be playing.
Something will make Maceo feel real old now. Next basketball season is the 10-year anniversary of the state championship.
Wow.
From East Carteret. Wow, it's been that long.
10 years, Maceo.
I mean, I was a young guy on that team anyway, so I'm not as old as it.
Now he's hedging.
Yeah, I was a young guy. I was like 14 on that team, so I didn't really.
So that was my first year here then.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was wild seeing him and Malik go on the floor as young guys. How nervous were you in those playoffs games in that state championship game?
Oh, man, I was too nervous. And I missed a free throw. Sam Johnson, one of the best shooters I've probably seen also, too. He kind of came up to me after I missed. He was like, this is the reason why we lost. Last year, like free throws and rebounding, he was like, you better hit this one. I'm like the freshman, and they're seniors, him, Jock, Ty Simmons, Markel, Eddie Minchin. John Newton was a senior on that team, too. So, it was very, had a great leadership. So they were serious, and that was definitely one of the funnest times of my life. And Coach A, I love Coach A. He's one of the best coaches I've ever had, also too. But man, that year was fun, and you kind of learn. I'm happy I learned early in my life kind of what it felt like to be a part of a winning culture and a winning team, and guys who really cared about it. Because when they say winning teams are player-led, like the best teams are player-led, that's 100% true. Because those guys, Coach A really didn't have to say too much that year. They had a lot of guys who just lost in the state championship, so it meant so much to them. And I think that year we lost 2 games at the Beach Ball Classic in Myrtle Beach, and those guys, Jockey and them, they had lost like 1 game the year before, in the state championship, and this was early in the season during Christmas break. We lost to PJ Dozier, who went to University of South Carolina. I think he plays professional basketball, and another team, and we lost those 2 games. And after the game, it was like we just saw our grandmother die or something. Those guys were in there crying, like everything for a Christmas tournament game that had nothing to do with
different state, the whole thing,
the whole different state, nothing. But you just saw how much they cared about it and how much it meant to them. So I'm glad I kind of learned kind of early, kind of.
Did you hit that second free throw, by the way?
Yeah. Oh yeah. At one point,
I was gonna say he got his name in the scorebook in the state championship.
At one point in the state championship,
that's right.
I think we won by.
That's the encouragement
2.
of the leader there.
Yeah, we won by 2. But yeah, that was definitely one of the funnest times of my life, and I still talk to Coach Ed and some of those guys to this day, so it's all good. I saw Ty Simmons actually at the East-West game the other day, so it's good seeing him. He still got a pretty good jump shot.
Did you think, number one, you were even going to make varsity that year? Number two, did you think you were going to play after you made varsity?
I knew I was going to make varsity probably, but I didn't know how much I was going to play, especially just because obviously the same position I played was Jock's position, and I think he's probably the best player to ever come out of East Carteret, if I had to say. So that was kind of a thing. And, for the first week after football season that year, I practiced with JV and varsity for the whole first week before the season started. And I just remember having a varsity practice with Pat. Coach Pat was a JV coach. And I remember having that first. And then the varsity practice was right after. We did the exact same things, but it was just like a whole different, switch came on, but you just kind of felt what it meant to be a part of a championship caliber team, like I was saying before. So I just remember the first drill we did, somebody got their shot hit off the backboard by Trevor Willis, and I was just kind of dang, what's going on? This is completely different. Coach A was like, this is not like the last practice, whatever. I was like, yeah, it's different. But yeah, that was definitely one of the best times I've had.
Do you think you turned into a different football player and basketball player in high school because of that experience playing with those guys that first year and what they taught you about intensity and work ethic?
Yeah, definitely just how competitive they were, and just their work ethic. Because you got to have a great work ethic to be good at anything you do. And I kind of learned that early, being with them, just getting shots up with Jockey or Sam before school and stuff on the shooting machine and things like that. So that definitely carried on, just because you wanted to touch that success you had before, because that's the first big championship I ever won, and I didn't have another championship until bowl game last year. But it's just kind of that. You just kind of learn that feeling just leading up to a season is kind of the guys you have in the locker room. Okay, this year could be the year, we do something pretty special and stuff. So I definitely would say that time with them, kind of shaped me for my future athletic endeavors. Yeah,
those guys were all skilled and talented, they're shooting, rebounding, dribbling, whatever you want to say. But I feel like their spirit, their competitive, that became legendary. I remember Billy Anderson, the coach, telling me that there were practices that he had to call off because he was scared a fight was going to break out.
Oh yeah, Jockey and Sam were best buds. Jockey, Sam, Markel, Eddie Minchin, Ty Simmons, John Newton, even Trevor was a year younger than them. And those were some of the most competitive times ever. Jockey and Sam getting into it, Sam and Trevor getting into it, Sam and Jock getting into it, all of them getting on Trevor, whatever. It was just always really, really competitive. And like you said, me and Malik Collins, who were kind of the younger guys getting some minutes.
He was a sophomore,
right? He was a sophomore year earlier, and us being a part of that team even later just kind of drove that competitiveness, whether it was basketball or football, where we had a really good team those next following years after that. So we just all wanted to win, and I think those lessons we learned from those other guys definitely kind of helped us.
My favorite story about their competitiveness, and I've never spoken about this publicly, but I'll go ahead and give the story now, is when the girls also made the state championship run in the spring. The soccer team.
The soccer team, yeah.
And half the basketball team was dating half the soccer team, and they traveled to, what was it, state?
NC State, NC State.
They were cheering for him real big in the stands, and then later on, Billy told me he was really they were rooting against them because they had lost the state championship. They didn't want their girlfriends to have that over.
They got their wish, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they those guys were super competitive.
Yeah, hyper competitive.
Yeah,
almost to a sick mental level.
Oh yeah, but Coach Anderson was just the same way.
Yeah,
he was just a coach and done with his playing days. But Coach A was the same way. Just everything you did. We were just. I don't know what it was about it. I don't even know if you can really you can train to be like that, but some of that is just, you're just born with that, and that's just who you are. You just want to compete and win everything.
Kind of a tough fall for Maceo. We're talking about following East Carolina football and East Carteret football. The winter might be a little bit better for you. So you covered a few basketball games. What do you think the winter looks like for Carteret County basketball?
I would say if East gets a big man, just kind of develops over the season, to just kind of do their role and maybe pitch in around 8 to 10 points a game, then I think East probably will be the best team in the conference. I haven't got to see Croatan yet. Heard they might have a few players and obviously helicopters over there, but I definitely say East. West is pretty good though, and Will Kenyon has some guys rolling over there. So I'm gonna roll with East just because my picture's in the gym, so I can't show up on Friday to the game after picking another school. So definitely East.
Either way, it's more fun to watch.
Yeah, it is. It's fun.
Thanks, Maceo. We'll have you back again soon.
Yes, sir.
I'm Ryan Kelly.
I'm Lynn Schultz.
And we're the hosts of the Senior Moment Podcast.
Each week, we bring you conversations with experts right here in our community about the common and uncommon challenges facing our aging population and caregivers.
We discuss the challenges of caring for a loved one with dementia, as well as the importance of health planning, family history, and much more.
Join us every week for Senior Moment, streaming now on Spotify, YouTube, and at CarolinaCoastonline.com.